In this video, we are going to work through a general triangle. So when designing a kitchen, the stove, sink, and refrigerator form a work triangle. By design, the three parts of the work triangle must be no less than 3 feet apart and no more than 7 feet apart. In a current kitchen, the sink is 3.6 feet away from the stove and 5.7 feet away from the refrigerator. If the sink forms a 120-degree angle with the stove and the refrigerator, explain mathematically whether the distance between the stove and the refrigerator will satisfy the requirements of the work triangle. Wow, there's a lot of words in that paragraph. So let's figure out what are the important things. In the end, we want to figure out, does this satisfy the requirements of a work triangle? And the requirements of a work triangle are that all of the distances have to be between 3 and 7 feet. So have to be between 3 and 7 feet. We already know that two of them are 3.6 and 5.7. Both of those are between that 3 and 7 feet. And so it looks like we are solving for the last side length. And if the last side length fits within this, then we know that it fits the work triangle. So step one, draw. Let's draw this out. And we might have to reread. So in a current kitchen, the sink is 3.6 feet away from the stove. So I'm going to start with the sink. I'm going to say this is the sink. And my drawing is definitely not going to be to scale. But I know that that is 3.6 feet away from the stove. And it's 5.7 feet away from the refrigerator. And this is where reading gets a little bit tricky because what is 5.7 feet away from the refrigerator? It's not the stove, it's the sink. The sink is 3.6 feet away from the stove and it's 5.7 feet away from the refrigerator. So we're going to go in this direction. This line should be a little bit longer. That angle should be a little bit bigger. Yeah, that's okay. So this is going to be 5.7 feet. And this is going to be the refrigerator. And we are going to be solving for this here. This is 120 degrees because it tells us that in the question. So we have set up our triangle. This is not a right triangle. We have one angle, we have two sides, and we are looking for the opposite side to the angle. So we need to figure out, are we going to use law of sines or are we going to use law of cosines? Now remember, for law of sines, you need an opposite pair. You need an angle that's opposite of a side. We do not have that. So law of sines is not going to work because we don't have this angle, we don't have this angle, we don't have this side. So we're going to use law of sines or law of cosines. So law of cosines says that x squared is equivalent to a squared plus b squared minus 2ab cosine of x. Let's fill in what we know. So we know x squared is going to be equivalent to 3.6 squared plus 5.7 squared minus 2 times 3.6 times 5.7 times cosine of 120 degrees. Now, of course, you could start simplifying this if you want to. One thing that I would be aware of, I have seen numerous people plug this into the calculator and then multiply by cosine of 120. No, 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 no. This is one factor. All of these are multiplied together. So make sure that when you plug it in, all of those things are multiplied together. What's easier is if you have a scientific calculator, you can plug everything in at exactly the same time. So let's see this. We will say 3.6 squared plus 5.7 squared minus 2 times 3.6 times 65.7 times cosine of 120 degrees. And again, our calculator is in degree mode, so that is great. And we get 65.97. So I plugged everything into the calculator at the same time, because by plugging everything into the calculator at the same time, it did the order of operations for me. It says it can convert it to a fraction. Yeah, I guess we could. So that tells us that x squared is 65.97. To get x alone, you have to take the square root. So let's go ahead and do that. So we want the square root of 65.97, and we get 8.1. And make sure that you are paying attention to where you are rounding. So it says, I guess it doesn't matter if this one we aren't rounding, because it's going to say explain mathematically whether the distance between the stove and the refrigerator satisfy. So it doesn't tell us to round it. So we found that this is 8.1. Does this satisfy our work triangle? Well, our work triangle says x has to be between 3 and 7. X is not between 3 and 7, so does not satisfy. So this does not satisfy that work triangle.